Narcissistic people, toxic people, tend to expect you to be okay with things that they wouldn't be okay with. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel where we discuss all things narcissism, and this video is going to be several of the narcissist double standards, several things that a narcissistic person believes it's okay for them and expects you to be okay with it and just deal with it. However, they wouldn't be okay to be on the receiving end of this treatment. When it comes to narcissistic people, it's one rule for them and another rule for you. They might even say, do as I say and not as I do. So when it comes to dealing with narcissistic people, one of the first things that they believe that they're entitled to do and morally superior than you, so it's okay for them to do it, is hide things from you, hide information from you, hide plans from you, hide family from you, hide their location from you, hide their phone from you, hide your items from you. They will find a way to justify and rationalise as to why that is okay for them to do those sorts of things to you. They'll claim that they're protecting your feelings, or they was just trying to help. It was only because they care and they knew you'd act like this. However, you are not allowed to hide anything from them. If you try and hide anything from them, they begin to attack you. They get you to a point where you begin to hide information from them because they use that information against you to hurt you, so you feel bad not informing them. Yet you know full well that if you go and see your sibling, if you go and see your parent, they're going to have the face on. So you're less willing to inform them, and then when they inevitably find out, they punish you. They claim they can't trust you, and this is when you get to a point where you're hiding everyday normal things that you should be able to do in a genuine relationship. Narcissistic people hide when they're lying and cheating and deceiving and manipulating and exploiting and hurting you and making it so you can't make an informed choice. Another thing a narcissist expects you to be okay with is them ignoring you, them falling silent on you, them ghosting you. That's allowed. You hurt their feelings, you offended them, you said no to them, you didn't put them first, you called them out on something. So they are allowed to fall silent on you. They're allowed to ignore you. However, you should never fall silent on them. You don't have the right to do that. You should never ignore them. When they want your attention, you need to give it to them and supply it to them there and then. You need to drop everything to serve them. If you don't, they're going to fall silent on you, and they're just on falling silent on you. However, if you ask them to do something that they'd originally promised to do for you, and they turn around and say, no, I'm not doing that. You said you would. Oh, you're gaslighting me. You actually... So you just drop the subject, realise that you're not going to get anywhere with them, you can't communicate with them, and ignore them. They get a face on. They get offended. You can be having a conversation with them and you can be trying to tell them something that's happened to another person that's good or bad, or something that's happened to you that's good or bad, and they switch off because they're not interested, because it's not about them, and because they can't use it against you. They're right to switch off. However, if they're trying to say something to you, they need your full attention and they need your full focus. They'll often intentionally pick a moment when you need to be there for somebody else. You need to be there for your minor child. And they know full well you've got to be there to pick somebody up or do something, when all of a sudden they want your undivided attention. So they can ignore you. You should never ignore them. They can tell you what to do. They can tell you exactly how you should behave and what you should wear and where you should go and how you should speak to them. They can tell you what you need to do. However, you can't even ask them for a simple favour because they make out that you're expecting too much from them. You can't wince if you go and avoid asking them for a favour, because they're going to make out that you're in the wrong some way. So you go and do it for yourself, they're going to attack you for not asking them to help. Yet if you ask them to help, they're going to have a go at you, that you don't respect how busy they are as a person. So a narcissistic person will happily tell you what to do. You can't ask them for anything. A narcissist will happily take your stuff, or they'll ask to borrow your stuff, and then they will delay returning it. They like to keep hold of it as their own, claim that it's theirs, that you gave it to them, or they return it damaged and claim that that's the condition you loaned it to them in. They seem to believe they're entitled to their own stuff and everybody else's, especially if they're envious of what somebody else has got. They will seek a way to just take it. So they believe they're entitled to just take your stuff. However, they get offended if you ask to borrow anything of theirs. They can walk past the neighbour's property and take a pair of ladders if nobody's watching. Yet if you ask to borrow a bucket from them, they get offended. Why can't you just go and buy your own? So when it comes to narcissistic people, they can borrow your stuff. You should never ask to borrow theirs. Narcissistic people are incredibly envious of other people. However, they'll not admit to this. They're allowed to pull you down, but you should never pull them down. If you're pulling them down, they accuse you of being jealous of them to make themselves feel superior, as narcissistic people tend to be very envious of others, believing others are envious of them. So they're allowed to criticize, mock, humiliate, judge you. You are not allowed to even give them the slightest bit of constructive feedback, because they're going to be offended by this. They're allowed to be flirtatious with others. They're allowed to chat with strangers. They're allowed to exaggerate their lies with strangers. You are not allowed to look at somebody else in front of them. Otherwise, they accuse you of looking elsewhere. So you're not allowed to look at others. They'll happily flirt with others. You're more often than not, a narcissistic person will go all out to impress strangers rather than take care of their own family. You, on the other hand, are not allowed to speak to your friends and family. Maybe once a year at Christmas, which a narcissist will go all out to sabotage for you anyway. So you're not allowed to speak to your friends and your family. They're allowed to go around impressing strangers. A narcissist will never forgive you for finding out the truth about them. They're allowed to hold that grudge and hold on to that resentment and gain that revenge on you. However, you should always forgive them. You shouldn't seek any form of revenge on them. You shouldn't be resentful. If you're resentful, then you're just bitter and that's your problem. Whereas if they're bitter, then that is also your problem. They won't run anything by you. They just make a decision and act impulsively on it and go ahead, and if it affects you, then that's your problem. You're the one that needs to deal with it, or they gaslight it away. So they don't have to run anything by you. However, you have to run everything by them. Otherwise, they get offended and seek to punish you. They're allowed to abandon you. They're allowed to go out with their friends. They're allowed to go out with a bunch of strangers. They're allowed to discard you when you're no longer supplying them. However, you should never abandon a narcissistic person, because this questions their ego and their sense of superiority over you. So they're allowed to abandon you. You should never abandon them, because they will then play the victim of just what a terrible person you are. They'll go right ahead and smear your name to discredit your character, to gain enablers and fly monkeys onto their side. There are plenty of double standards narcissistic and toxic people display, where it is one rule for them and another rule for you. Any that you notice, please add those into the comments for people reading through. Thank you very much to all the returning subscribers and your continued support with the channel. It's greatly appreciated. If you are new to the channel, this channel is all about narcissistic behaviour, to give you more understanding of the people you might be dealing with within your life, how to handle yourself around those people if you cannot go no contact, and different methods to find what works for you to help you understand and overcome narcissistic and emotional abuse. If you do find the information helpful on the channel, please do subscribe. If you are looking for further help and support in understanding and overcoming narcissistic and emotional abuse, I do have several online guides available, and those teachable links are in the video description. If you're looking for someone to speak to, I have partnered with BetterHelp, and their sponsored link is also in the video description. I do have a new book out on Amazon, which is 15 Rules to Deal with Narcissistic People, if you'd like to take a look at that. Thank you very much for listening. Go out there and create the day that you deserve, because you do deserve to have an amazing day. Bye.